Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. This portion of the program has been pre-recorded to accommodate the schedule of our guest. We have joining us this afternoon Catherine Jorden. She is the senior advisor for Congressman Walter Jones. And today we're not talking specifically about the congressman insofar as his condition is concerned. We will ask her about the status, but I'm sure that there's a limit to what she can say, and predominantly because, well, frankly, it's now the purview of the family, but we will chat briefly with her. I'm going to give her sort of a heads up on that one as we begin the program. But this is really a story related to the congressman's efforts on behalf of members of the United States Marine Corps. And this is a story I read in the Washington Post just this past week, and I've not seen a great deal of publicity on this, unfortunately, but I think it warrants some acknowledgement and understanding today. So I've asked our guest, Catherine Jorden, to join us. Again, she is the senior advisor for Congressman Walter Jones. And with that, Catherine, good afternoon. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Hey, Lockwood. Thank you so much for having me.
A pleasure. By the way, just to make note of this, Catherine and I have known each other for many years. She was the press secretary for Congressman Jones in Washington, D.C. before returning to her hometown of Greenville.
That is true.
So it's been a while. Catherine, real quickly, just as we begin the program, I know there's a lot of interest, status of the congressman. Is there any new information to be shared?
Lockwood, there's not any new updates. There's really nothing new to be shared. I know everyone has seen our press release regarding the congressman being in hospice at this time. As far as any update further, that will come from the family. Okay. We are respecting their privacy and their wishes at this time. Obviously, it's a challenging time. It's hard for all of us, and we just really appreciate everybody giving the congressman and primarily his family the respect that he has earned.
And space to accommodate the circumstances that they face, as well as to another point, Catherine, and that, of course, is, well, business has to be conducted. There's work for you, the staff, that has to be done.
Nothing changes for us.
Right.
Our offices are still running as they do. You know, the business of this office is continuing, and that is our main focus is to continue to do what the congressman has always asked of us.
And of course, you've got staff in Washington, D.C. that are responding to calls and trying to assist where necessary. And a good example of something similar is trying to arrange for overseas travel and things of that nature. So, those activities continue.
Right, and there's still legislative activity continuing as far as things that we've introduced in the past and the things the congressman is still trying to get accomplished, and that all of that work continues in D.C.
Well, I'm glad you said accomplished. Let's talk about this. Almost mission accomplished. Well, actually, it had been somewhat accomplished, and this regarding 7 Marines of the MARSOC Command, and retired Major Fred Galvin and 6 other Marines who at one point faced court-martial as a result of action in Afghanistan, 2006, 2007, as I recall?
March of 2007.
Okay, and a recent story appearing in the Washington Post, and I, again, will remark that I've not seen a lot of stories about this here recently, but the headline reads, "These Marines were falsely accused of war crimes. 12 years later, they have vindication." Let's talk about this, if you will. And by the way, noted throughout the story is the work that Congressman Walter Jones did on behalf of the Marines and their families. So a little background on this, if you will, Catherine.
Sure. So in March of 2007, these 7 Marines, members of MARSOC, were first unit to go over there in Afghanistan. They were accused, to make a very long story short, they were wrongfully accused of murdering innocent civilians in Afghanistan. They were under ambush, and somehow the story got told that there were just bodies everywhere, civilians, children, women, the whole bit, which was not true at all. And unfortunately, the Marine Corps and the Army commanders at the time primarily, threw these guys under the bus and said that this happened when it did not happen. They later faced a court of inquiry down at Camp Lejeune, and that is the court of inquiry is the highest highest level administrative fact-finding body, I guess is how they put it, to examine what went on in that incident. The court of inquiry I don't think there had been one conducted since the 50s at this point, but it looked into it, and the judgment made by the court of inquiry was that these men did nothing wrong. There was no massacre. There were no innocent lives lost. There was no civilian murders. None of this happened. So the court of inquiry came out with that cleared them, but they lost their jobs. They were kicked out of the Corps. They lost, their personal lives. Basically, their entire careers were ruined because of a lie.
And partly because the decision of that court of inquiry was just casually conducted. The conclusions were casually released. And in fact, according to stories, and I want to bring up this one aspect of the story, Catherine, and that, of course, is Andy D. Grand Prix, and is it Andy D. Andy D. Grand Prix, who did was it a 4-part series?
He did a 5-part series for the Military Times called Task Force Violent, and that he really went into he delved in this story, and it was, very specific. He worked with Fred Galvin on this story and did the proper interviews and worked with our office for a very long time before releasing this 5-part series, which I believe he won some awards for because it was just so in depth and it was so detailed. And he's the one who just wrote this Washington Post piece that came out last week that you mentioned earlier, just to kind of wrap it up. So Andy did that, and that is really what started the public's interest in this, because after the court of inquiry, the commander of the Marine Corps Forces Central Command publicly released a statement saying that these men acted appropriately and in accordance with the rules of engagement and tactics. He said they didn't do anything wrong, but I believe, if memory serves, that press release was issued on at 6:00 on a Friday of Memorial Day weekend.
Right.
So that's not getting picked up.
It did not get picked up. It notes here, Galvin was the commanding officer of Marine Special Operations Company, FOX. March 4, 2007, he and 29 others traveled on a 6-vehicle convoy through a village of Batikat
province.
A suicide bomber driving a van packed with explosives attacked the American vehicles, and then the fighters on both sides of the road opened up. The Marines fought back and escaped with only minor injuries. The problem here apparently was that the decisions from the court of inquiry were pretty much sidetracked. There was no major explanation and understanding, nor, if you will, exoneration. 12 years later, and by the way, I just want to mention this, Congressman Jones has been engaged in this for all those years? Yeah,
the congressman has been actively engaged in clearing the effort to clear the names of these Marines for over 10 years. And this was something, I know everyone is probably familiar with his involvement clearing the names of the 2 pilots of the V-22 that crashed in the year 2000. This was also equally as near and dear to his heart over these years. This is something that still to this day means a great deal to him, and he's beyond pleased to see the outcome.
Well, it notes here, as the former commanding officer, Galvin, that's Major Galvin, now retired, has continued to press the Marine Corps headquarters to do more to set the record straight, beginning in 2015 with support from 5 members of Congress. Multiple entreaties had been made to the service's most senior officer. By the way, interestingly enough, reading the story from Mr. de Grand Prix, the only congressman that openly supported this effort was Congressman Jones. He noted in his other stories, which I thank you very much for sharing with me, the other members of Congress who were participating did not want to expose themselves, if you will, to the potential of, difficulties associated with getting further actions taken on their behalf. I just find that, somewhat disappointing, but also very supportive of Congressman Jones. I think it's impressive. And, to you, Catherine, and again, Catherine Fedor with us, Catherine, that's her previous name, Catherine Jorden.
I got married a while ago.
Yes, you did. Catherine Jorden with us this afternoon. You went through some of these efforts on behalf of the congressman. You attended meetings and things of this nature. Was not an easy effort, was it?
No, it's never an easy effort to get any institution to admit wrongdoing, admit that they were wrong, and ask them to clear the record. It should be something easy. It should be, you know what? All we're asking you to do is publicly state that you agree with your own court of inquiry findings. We're asking you just to make it public for these men who gave so much and lost so much.
And I would say in the process you had some who, of course, were basically drummed out of the core because of the reputation. To wrap it up with you, and of course this is related to a story appearing in this past week's issue of the Washington Post. A lot of people criticize the Washington Post, of course, this day and age, but I really appreciate the fact that they've stuck to this story. It was noted that the Navy Review Board has basically said that the major and the 6 other Marines that were part of this court of inquiry were poorly handled and poorly received poor consideration. They were pretty critical of the Marine Corps and the whole process, were they not?
Right. So the congressman, to give everybody just a brief, we wrote Commandant Neller back in late 2017, I believe December of 17, asking him to look at this case with a fresh pair of eyes and just see, what he thought and what he could do. His office came back saying, we agree with our court of inquiry. We will make that public. We agree with them. They are exonerated. So their names were exonerated more or less. Mm-hmm. And Andy did a story on that in the Washington Post at the time as well, back in February of 18, I believe. So now this story this week is the big one. This is the result of the Board of Correction for Naval Records, their findings. This clears personnel records. This delves into the nitty-gritty details of what went on and what these guys personally went through and professionally. The BCNR, the Board of Correction for Naval Records, is not very forgiving. Very rarely do they ever say, hey, you know what, this guy was thrown under the bus. They rarely do that. The big break here is they have come out and not only have they said Fred Galvin and the 6 other men were treated incredibly, were completely falsely accused, and they have been treated horribly since. Not only that, it names names of the Marine Corps officers and the Army officers who were at fault for perpetuating this lie and for ruining the careers and lives of these Marines. So, the good news here is that it's taken 12 years, but they're up for back pay. Right. They were forced out of the Corps. Major Galvin is up for a promotion. He could be bumped up, regardless of the fact. And he wants, still after all this, he wants to return to active duty.
Wow. I'm going to quote from the story. The magnitude of his errors, this of course being the issue of the Court of Inquiry, cannot be overstated. It notes here explicitly only as a gross negligence or a mission with a predetermined outcome. In essence, there was an effort to, if you will, predetermine that he was guilty. The court of this appeal is significant. I mean, the criticisms are significant.
I mean, these men were accused of murdering children that never happened. They couldn't get jobs. That not only were they kicked out of the Corps, basically, they couldn't get jobs in the private sector.
Right.
Who's going to hire them?
As we wrap it up with you, Catherine, this obviously, and in the state of current affairs, and of course we're talking about Congressman Walter Jones. Yes, he is in hospice. No, this story, it seems to me, is a breath of fresh air for the staff, for sure, you
Absolutely.
Particularly, but also I would hope for the family and for the congressman.
Absolutely, and he, like I said earlier, he's thrilled with the outcome. He's not for his, anybody who knows the congressman, it's never for him or about him. He's happy for these Marines. He's happy for Fred Galvin. He's happy that he could play a small role in getting this across the finish line, as he would always say. So he's thrilled to see it. He was very, very happy that Andy got this on the front page of the Washington Post, because it is a story that needs to be told. People do need to understand what happened to these men, and that they have finally gotten their vindication. And
the work that Congressman Jones did so gratefully for these men, and I also again have to say kudos and congratulations to the staff. Catherine,
thank you. Well, we couldn't do it without the congressman, and he's like a dog with a bone, and when he gets on something, then you better hang on, because you're all in. This is an important story. Catherine, thank you very much for being with us. Catherine Jorden with us this afternoon, again, senior advisor with Congressman Walter Jones. Catherine, have a great day. Appreciate your time. Thank you, Lockwood. You too. Viewpoints on the talk station, FM 107, AM 1240. And let me just